And I'm going to turn it over to you and hope that you just appear because you're not coming onto the main screen. Are you there, Raj?
Yes.
Okay. So just start, you could maybe start sharing whatever you'd like to share. And
That's from Chaitanya, that he sees Swami. Mahaprabhu sees Swami.
oh, some people are seeing him. We're not seeing him. Okay, it's weird.
Well, not much to share this morning. No news. Why don't we just go ahead and take the questions?
Okay, Tadas, you're up first.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. So I would like to ask a question. Some time ago, I used to watch in YouTube, there was a channel, Let's Talk with Swami Narasingha. And in one of his talks, he mentioned how he used to deliver sniffing tobacco to Prabhupada, and how Prabhupada used to sniff it early in the morning to to wake up faster or something like that. It used to help him in writing books, and how that the metal box used to be in museum in Vrindavan, but then it was removed. Well, he explained that because Prabhupada, he was like a pure devotee, so not how to say, that it was not affecting him or something like that. But then I tried to find that video, but I couldn't. So today I just Googled and I found one letter where Prabhupada was writing to Revitanandana. And here he is writing regarding taking snuff. I myself take it sometimes at night because I'm working at night on my books, and sometimes I become dizzy. But it is not for you to take. You should not imitate this, neither you walk like me at night. So the question would be how to understand that, because Prabhupada, he's Acharya and he's teaching according to his example. So this is the one. And the second is one of the four regulative principles, no intoxication, even not coffee or cacao or tea, but this is tobacco. So how to properly understand this thing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the general rule that Prabhupada employed amongst his disciples was not to take intoxication. And that's quite understandable. Sometimes that extended to things like coffee, tea, chocolate even, which are not really intoxicants. And while at the same time, they can, I guess, alter your metabolism or whatever. Coffee and tea, having caffeine can, keep you awake, and so forth. And I think that Prabhupada, in general, listed anything on a list that that might come up that was reported to him. I don't think he even had chocolate in his life or thought it was an intoxicant. Maybe somebody told him it was. But I think that typically, unlike most Hindus, the Vaishnavas avoided tea, and coffee's not a big thing in India, but tea is, given the British penchant for it and the richness of tea that's found in India. But that said, taking these things is not necessarily going to affect your bhakti. If you have tea or coffee, it's not necessarily going to affect your bhakti. And they're not, I would say, recommended. And there's a world difference between taking LSD and coffee. So Prabhupada was on the scene, so to speak, in the United States and in Europe, in the Western world, at a time when intoxication was really thought to be a plus by many people, many of the young people who were joining his movement. So he had kind of a far-reaching prohibition, as I say, on anything that remotely resembled an intoxicant. But yes, he took snuff, as he said, I guess, at night to keep him awake and so forth. And I think that that is something that someone who is himself beyond the rules, so to speak, can invoke in ways that may be useful for what he or she is doing, that is that wouldn't have the same effect on others. In other words, because Prabhupada takes snuff, it's not a blanket, or did at night sometimes, to stay up and write or whatever to balance out his dizziness, and as he put it, it's not a, he wanted to say, and I think rightfully so, it's not therefore a license that all of his disciples can or should take snuff. I mean, we were kind of like that. If Prabhupada did something, we would do it. I don't think there's any really major contradiction here to deal with. You have to look at the person. First of all, you have to look at the measure of what it means, what an intoxicant it is, as I've already said. These are minor things: coffee, tea, what to speak of chocolate. I mean, it's really not an intoxicant. So that's the one side. The other side of it is, as I say, great persons can do things that for explicit purposes that are their focus, and these are things that others then, who are not of the same stature, cannot do for the same result, or are not in the same position to even think about it, because they're not doing the same thing. As Prabhupada said to Bhaktinandan Swami, well, I'm staying up, Prabhupada, we would go to rest at night about 10 o'clock, and Prabhupada would then stay up and write till maybe 1 in the morning or something like that. He would sleep for 4 hours, and he was busy all day. So we weren't sleeping 4 hours. We weren't staying up at night and writing books and so on and so forth. And had we been able to do that, and we're qualified, then we might have been in a position to do something like Prabhupada. So the circumstances are entirely different between himself and his disciples on the one hand. So it's not a, you're doing therefore I should do at any time. That's not the case. In a very limited way, he was doing that. And he was, it obviously didn't affect him. I don't think it would affect, I don't know what snuff is. I guess it's tobacco. I guess it's kind of like a minor stimulant. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it but as I say, I don't think it necessarily even has to affect someone's Krishna consciousness, let's say drinking coffee, that's more common. I don't recommend it, but I wouldn't, if I was if some disciple called me and said, I'm driving back from, San Francisco after picking up so-and-so at the airport, we're both really exhausted. Maybe I should drink some coffee, to make the trip so we don't fall asleep. I'd probably tell them yes. So there are circumstances where such things could be allowed. I don't think having a habit of it is the best thing, or habit of anything. So it's a minor thing in one hand, and the circumstances are very different in terms of what Prabhupada was doing and how he was using it. And then there's who he is as a person to make those kind of decisions. Someone who's beyond the rules can break the rules without having the same repercussions that someone would who's not beyond the rules. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Hi. Greg, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hare
Okay.
Krishna Maharaj.
Okay, let me finish my coffee. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
Okay. Referring to your concluding words in your Bhagavad Gita, I was wondering if you could say a few words about Advaita Acharya, in particular, how he called Lord Chaitanya into this world.
A few words about Advaita Acharya calling Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the world.
Yes.
Well, that Leela is described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Bhagavad, other texts, and the broader idea is that the Mahavishnu is the first avatar. Avatar means the descent of the Godhead into time and space. Under the influence of his internal energy. So entering in time and space, not being affected by it. So from Narayan and Vaikuntha, the Mahasankarshan there, one of the fourfold manifestations of divinity in Vaikuntha, the Chaturvyuha, Mahasankarshan incarnates as Mahavishnu, right? So he's the first avatar. And then the Leela avatars, the Guna avatars, the Yuga avatars, different types of avatars, they all pass through the Mahavishnu. So Yuga avatars in particular is the subject when we speak of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance, because he appears as the Kali Yuga avatar, albeit in a hidden way, disguised as a devotee of himself for his own internal purposes and so forth. So given the fact that the avatars, Yuga avatars, appear through Mahavishnu, then there's a correspondence with Advaita Acharya being a very peculiar and interesting incarnation, expansion of Mahavishnu in the form of a devotee appearing in the world. He was a great Vaishnava of his time, teaching the Gita and the Bhagavatam and the devotional perspective on these texts and so on and so forth, and seeing the conditions of Kali Yuga and the lack of interest on the part of people in religious life and the Yuga Dharma. And so he calls Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Mahavishnu is calling Krishna to appear in the form of a Yuga avatar. That's one side of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Yuga avatar side, for the dissemination of the Nam Sankirtan, which is the Yuga Dharma, and so on and so forth. He has obviously an internal side as well, and that speaks to the internal reasons for his descent. But externally, he's appearing in a place or at a time of the Yuga avatar that just happens to correspond with his internal, Krishna's internal pursuit to taste the prema of Radha. So it's appropriate, given what I've explained, for Advaita Mahavishnu to bring him. So we also find that at a certain point in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela, after he had taken sannyas, which was for the purpose of facilitating the dissemination of the Yuga Dharma, at a certain point he asked the permission of Advaita to really to retire, in a sense, into his internal life and exclusive focus on that pursuit. This was in Jagannath Puri. He did it in a very kind of concealed way, with speaking in poetry to Advaita and getting his response. And Advaita responded, yes, there's no longer any need for rice in the market, something like that. The work of the Yuga Avatar has been done. You have set that in motion. And it's done. Now you have twofold purpose. You can, not that you weren't pursuing both purposes at the same time, but now, given the measure and extent of that internal purpose, you can exclusively dedicate your time to that. Mahaprabhu enters into his Antya Leela, and he, for all intents and purposes, becomes, from a public person, a private person by the force of his bhava. So Advaita is kind of overseeing the Yuga Dharma aspect of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Interestingly, it's also said that Advaitacharya, or excuse me, Haridas Thakur, who was a close associate of Advaita, and I believe was initiated by him, he used to refer to him, Advaita referred to Haridas as Brahma Haridas. And he it's also described in Chaitanya Charitamrita as, through his Nam Yagya, calling Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the world, Advaita brought him not through Nam Yagya or Japa, but through Puja and Archan. So he offered Tulsi and Ganga Jal, Ganga water from the Ganga, to the Shalagram, and called for the Yuga Avatar. This is Archan, and this is an example more of Vaidhi Marg than Rag Marg, whereas Nam Bhajan is more, is something that one can retire from or withdraw from Archan as one becomes adept in Nam Bhajan. So one can find, that is to say, the form of the Lord, realize, experience the form of the Lord in the name and his qualities and his leelas and so forth. So typically we don't see as much of an arrangement or participation in Archan, in deity worship, on the part of great saints. Now they have established temples. We have extraordinary stories sometimes of such exalted devotees engaging in Archan, but it's very different. Sanatana Goswami hanging his deity from a tree and arguing with him about the deity's complaint that he should at least supply some salt to the unleavened bread that he was offering without anything else. And Sanatana complained, well, first you want salt, then you want ghee, then you want vegetables. I'm a poor person, I can't provide that. So that's not ordinary deity worship, right? So there's a deity worship is Archan is an anga of bhakti, but it's more external, and the Nam Bhajan is more internal. So Haridas Thakur, in a sense, could be construed as the one who called him through his Nam Bhajan for his internal purpose, which would be appropriate for if you want to extend the idea of a Narmasaka, which we could identify Brahma with by looking at the Brahma Vimohan Leela and looking at the dawn of creation, at which time he was initiated by Krishna and offered Sakyarasa. Brahma Vimohan Leela, he's brought to Braj. He sees what Sakyarasa is, and he's further entering into that, but he made offense at the same time. He had to take birth as Haridas Thakur, and he is showing the way through his example of Nam Bhajan. And as I say, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he said to be calling also had a role in bringing the Lord. So you could make a feelingful case for Advaita bringing him for the purpose of Yuga Dharma, and Haridas Thakur bringing him in pursuit, calling him, encouraging him, so to speak, for the pursuit of his internal purpose. That such friends of Krishna are involved in. I mean, those are a few thoughts on that. Does that help? Jai. Advaita Acharya ki Jai. Haridas Thakur ki Jai.
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Right.
Okay, Devya Bhakti, you need to unmute.
Yes. Hare Krishna. Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Hare Krishna to the devotees. So I just wanted to say a few small, tiny points regarding this beautiful lecture yesterday that we heard about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and to place one question that is something else that is one kind of my dilemma always was, and I would like to understand how to act in this situation. So yesterday was interestingly enough the disappearance day also of Bhakti Gurava Nrsinga Maharaj. It so happened that he passed a year ago. So somehow these two dates, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and Bhakti Gurava Nrsinga Maharaj, and I have some sentiments for him because I lived there for a few months and he gave me some first. And this just came to my mind that it is like interesting that yesterday on this day also he was mentioned in a connection of this movie, and that's nice because also his pranam mantra is including this, how he's Bhaktisiddhanta follower, not tolerating some deviations like this. A second small comment would be how in this movie and also in the book that was written also about Bhaktisiddhanta, the exalted position of Bhaktisiddhanta was also seen when these people were coming from Bengal to offer respects, how they were carrying the train. Everybody was coming, Muslims also, everybody. So this showed how they felt this immense spirituality in his heart and like this. And the third small, I could say, speculation of mine, but I will say it, why not? When you spoke about the children of Srila Bhakti Vinod, first this wife and one child and another 12 children, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was sixth from this second wife. So this brought to my mind some kind of correlation, maybe. I mean, it's funny to say it, but because he was in the middle, so this reminded me of this like some chapter of Bhagavad Gita that is in the middle. So this is something very valuable. So like his children were 13, but Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was in the middle. So I thought if one can think like this, maybe like the most valuable child that he had. Sorry.
We do think he was the most valuable child. He certainly made the greatest contribution in terms of the dissemination of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which was an ambition of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And so in that sense, there's no argument there. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. Of course, I was a friend of Bhakti Gurava Nrsinga Maharaj, despite the fact that we had some differences. Yes, he liked to. I would say that I mentioned yesterday that my window into the life of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was through Prabhupada, Sridhar Maharaj, and Pujapad Puri Maharaj. And I would say that Narasingha Maharaj got quite inspired by the perspective shared by Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, the mission, how it worked, some of the details. And he himself was kind of like that. He really liked the idea of a monastic order and a mission, and he was a very organized kind of a regimented kind of a fellow. And so he identified with that feature, that window into what Gaudiya Math was like. And of course, he was no longer a member of ISKCON. It was a bit caustic, so he used to like to bring out the differences, if you will. So he did some good work, I think, with the film, and he had some kind of identification developed within him with Bhaktisiddhanta and the way he did things and so forth. So those are some thoughts on that.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask one question, my dilemma. For years, when something of sort happens, then I don't know what to say, if I'm committing offense or not. Namely, sometimes some very beautiful women would like to speak with the devotees to be preached to or like this, because when I'm not enough verse to explain to somebody something, that's okay, you can come here and or I can give you some content and like this. So usually the devotees that I can point to is some spiritual masters, some advanced brahmacharis or whatever. So then I have a problem, like, should I, this, let's say, Maya Devi, how we call it, woman, put in contact with some devotee, because maybe it will be something problematic, ultimately. On the other side, I cannot check some spiritual soul, although it is Maya Devi, to come in contact with devotees and to be preached to. So I don't know how to handle this.
Yeah. Well, you could say that women are Maya for men, but you could say that men are Maya for women. And that's a heterosexual perspective. There's also the homosexual perspective. So the attraction of the sexes basically is what makes the world go round. And rather than continuing the samsara, we want to transcend the samsara. That said, I think that one should feel confident to bring to or direct any man should feel confident or comfortable directing or bringing to any beautiful woman, however beautiful, attractive, whatever may be the case in his eyes, or objectively so, to a sadhu, to if she's expressing interest in Krishna consciousness, that kind of confidence in the sadhu, and if you don't have that kind of confidence in the sadhu, then what's the point of bringing anybody there? Prabhupada, once I was a young man, I had taken sannyas, I think that year, 1975, when I was sitting with Prabhupada in his room alone in New York, on the 11th floor, and he said to me, "Have you seen the New York women?" I didn't know what he was really getting at, and he said, before I could answer, he said, "They're so beautiful, so attractive." And then he went on to say that that all these buildings are going up, and then it's all driven by this attraction, by this attraction. It's a way of talking about it. And he says, "See the power of Vishnu Maya, which is this the power, how women energize men to do things, how men energize women to do things, and so forth. So he went into it was really interesting, and then he said, "See the Vishnu Maya." So I didn't know if he was like testing me as a young sannyasi or what, but he was just kind of like speaking about it, so he could appreciate the beauty of the New York women or wherever, and not be affected by it in a way that would be counterproductive to his spirituality. So we should have the confidence in our spiritual leaders and sadhus and association that we have, that they wouldn't be affected by that. And again, if we don't, then we should probably find somebody that we do have that kind of confidence in. Okay, what else?
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, I just was wondering when, was it Sridhar Maharaj that was
Oh,
taking
yeah.
sannyas and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur? That would be a nice, just are you prepared to preach to women?
Well, the one I'm thinking, the one I'm thinking, one of my godbrothers wanted to take sannyas for Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj, and so he, after some days, weeks, whatever, Sridhar Maharaj agreed, and then so just before he gave him the mantra, he said, "So are you prepared to speak to the women, preach to women?" Which was like, he thought that was like, he didn't know what to think, but what Sridhar Maharaj was saying is you should be above the attraction that in terms of it having any negative repercussions or result if you're going to be a sannyasi. Sannyasa is not running away from women, hiding from them, or running away from men and hiding from them. There's something to be said in the beginning for out of sight, out of mind, to arrange a lifestyle for oneself if one's a renunciate, which is moving away from the world anyway. But ultimately, really, renunciation in Gaudiya Vaishnavism should be a result of bhakti. It's not a means to bhakti. So, some thoughts on that. So, what else?
Krishnangi, you want to unmute yourself?
Guru Maharaj, I was talking with a friend who said that they appreciate the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, but otherwise they have a hard time approaching Krishna and understanding his leelas. And I made the point that in order to develop love for God, it's easier if we know as much as possible about God and his pastimes, as opposed to sort of God being some kind of an impersonal, distant old man on the cloud, so to speak. And my friend agreed with this sort of in principle, but said that the fact that Krishna is an Indian god makes it difficult for them to approach him, that he feels foreign. And I was wondering if you could say something about I'm sure you've answered this many times before, but if you could say something about the significance of Krishna appearing specifically in India in this world.
Well, there's different ways to think about that, but I think that one way to deal with that issue is to make the point, which I think would resonate with many people, is that we're all earthlings. So we're all members of the same planet. So if you're all Scandinavians, then wherever God appears in Scandinavia doesn't make a difference, whether it's Gothenburg or it's Denmark or wherever. Or if you're all Americans and God appears in New York rather than California, there's not going to be a big argument about it. He appeared in America. So we have designated ourselves as members of one country or another country, and there's a cultural context to that, background, habits, and ways of thinking, and so on and so forth. But the larger picture and it's one that we need to go to, is that we're all members of the earth. And these national differences, the more they're emphasized, the more problematic things become. So, the best example there in Europe is the national, what was it, National Socialist Party of Nazi Germany, or the attempt in the United States recently to make a similar national identity and register people from different countries, like the Jews were registered in Germany and so forth. So I think a lot of people will be able to go that distance and say that it's a bigger idea to say that we're all humans, that we're all members of the planet, and so forth. And there's diversity on the planet, but it's all part of what we're part of. It's not a foreign thing. So Indian culture is not, shouldn't be seen as foreign. God appeared on earth. Now, we don't say, that said, that God only appears in India, but we say a particular expression of divinity has appeared in India, and that's Krishna. There are other expressions of divinity also appearing in other cultures. And so you could gravitate towards the one that's prominent in your culture, or you could transcend limited cultural sensibilities to an extent, and identify with the virtues, for example, in an essential sense of any other culture. There may be some countries that are more rajasic and sattvic in their nature, and some that are or rajasic and tamasic, some that are more sattvic. Let's take India. Okay, India is a country where the teaching about reincarnation, for example, comes from. So are you going to say that reincarnation is Indian? Or do you identify with reincarnation? India is the country that more than any other country where you have a ageless idea of an Atma. Not only just a vague idea of the soul, but a very well-defined, although it's talked about from different angles of vision, from different philosophers and theologians, still a sense of this Atma, what is consciousness. So, we're all consciousness. Okay, we're no longer Finnish. We're no longer American. We're consciousness. One thing is we're earthling. Okay, we're take it another level. We're all consciousness. Now, if somebody can identify with that argument, and if this consciousness is surrounded by a biological, physiological, makeup, and that it can transcend that, and that's the goal. If someone can identify with those ideas of the Gita, for example, then where do those ideas come from? They come from a particular culture on Earth, on our planet. So if we want to identify with them, we don't think I'm identifying with India per se, and a limited particular culture. I'm identifying with the Atma. It's an idea, a concept, a notion, that philosophy that arises in that culture. So there may be things about that culture that are advantageous for that. There are other cultures that may be more advantageous for other things. And so on our shared planet, we might identify with one country for its virtues and its excellences in any particular field. India happens to excel in this field, in the nature of consciousness. And so these are arguments of the Gita that I think that, as you say, someone identifies with: reincarnation, the Atma. So you don't think they're Indian, so don't think that Krishna is necessarily Indian. Yes, he's kind of Indian. But this is, you can say this is Indian culture speaking about the Paramatma that corresponds with the Atma, in terms of reciprocal loving dealings. And we have found in that culture very compelling underlying theological and philosophical arguments for Leela, for there to be movement in transcendence, for there to be variegatedness in transcendence, for there to be reciprocal dealing between the individual Atma and the Paramatma. And we call that prema, we call that Leela, that movement. So they should identify with these basic principles. And then the fact that those who have thought about that, which is an exciting idea that your contemporary there seems to agree with, shouldn't be then dismissed, because the way in which that country has talked about that in detail has the trappings of Indian culture. How else would they talk about it? And as such, it's the people who are speaking about it, they have some penetration into it. Now, we think it transcends the cultural limitations of India, if you will, but they enter into it and they come back into the world in Indian culture and then speak about it. And that speaking has great power, even if it is employing things from this world, as it must. Words themselves are from this world. Thoughts themselves are from this world. So the descriptions of Krishna Leela don't do justice to God's Leela and the idea that there is such a thing as Leela and movement and a transpersonal person, I want to say, that is the Godhead. The descriptions don't do justice to it, but we don't have any better descriptions that are so well supported by other theological and philosophical insights and arguments and so on and so forth. So we readily accept that the descriptions of Krishna Leela on the part of, like, say, Rupa Goswami or whomever are limited. They don't do justice to what the Leela is. And because that Leela is beyond thought, beyond word, but those thoughts and words are powerful. And we don't have any other further reaching explanations of such a phenomenon. I mean, that I know of, certainly not in Buddhism, in Christianity, in Islam, in the Jewish tradition, in various pagan descriptions. The idea even of an Atma is often very vague. Here it's very specific. And then what speak of the nature of transcendence, the nature of the Godhead. So we think that the Bhagavad Gita and its theological sequel, the Bhagavatam, have said more about that and offer us powerful narratives that can help us to transcend the limits of mind and speech and enter into all that Leela is, as a friend of God, as a lover of God, and so forth. So we're kind of using those limited explanations as a means to enter into that which they seek to do justice to, but cannot entirely. I mean, that's a big, long answer, I know, but we're taking some notes, so hopefully something from that would be useful. But I think you can universalize, the concept very easily and help them to get a grip on it. And of course, then ask them to take their shoes off when they come in and have a nice vegetarian meal, which is not particularly Finnish either, but it might be nice. So there might be some nice things about other cultures. And here we are again, back to the beginning, members of Earth. Let's take from this culture and that culture as maybe we find attractive and make something that transcends all cultures, right? Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much, Guru Maharaj.
Okay. Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Krishna Lila ki jai.
So Pamanava Swami has a question from the Spanish side.
Yes. What's the question?
He's giving the question to saying it to his Spanish.
See, indeed. Okay. So Brahman is one face of the Godhead. We have Bhagavan, we have Paramatma, we have Brahman. And then the Godhead has Shaktis. So the three principal Shaktis are the Swarup Shakti, the Maya Shakti, and the Tatastha or the Jiva Shakti. So the Shaktis are one with God, but different from God at the same time. Paramatma and Brahman are different faces of the Absolute, as is Bhagavan, but they are not one and different like Brahman or the Godhead and his Shaktis. So the Jiva Shakti, the Tasta Shakti, is different from Brahman. It's not Brahman. Brahman is undifferentiated face of the Absolute. The equation in Brahman is Satchidananda with an emphasis on Sat, and the Chit and the Ananda are kind of secondary in relation to the Sat. In the Paramatma feature, then you have Satchidananda, and Chit is the prominent feature. In Bhagavan, you have Satchidananda, and then the Ananda is the prominent feature. But the Tatastha Shakti, it's also Satchidananda, Anu, atomic in size, and it's Sat, it's eternal, it has the capacity to know, it has the capacity to have, I want to say, experience, to love, to taste bliss, and so forth. That's a little different than being constituted of bliss and as Bhagavan is, and knowledge. But at any rate, we do say that it is Satchidananda, but it's different from Brahman. So you could become self-realized and not at the same time be Brahman realized. And that would be, self-realization would be the penultimate state before the ultimate attainment of Brahman realization for those who pursue that realization. So anyway, Brahman is not the Tatastha Shakti. No, they're different. Now, the Atma, the Jivatma, through the influence of Bhakti, the blessing of Bhakti, can enter into Krishna Lila and be, as is required, suitably equipped to participate in the Lila by having a form, personality, and so forth. It means a gross and a subtle body, if you will, all constituted of the Swarup Shakti. It's different than having a material body and mind or personality, in that Maya Shakti is Asat, Achit, Nirananda, and the Jiva is Satchidananda. So one is Chit, the other is Achit. So it's not really a good mix. whereas the Swarup Shakti is Chit, also consciousness. So the Atma, the Jivatma, and the Swarup Shakti, they are a better fit, so to speak, two likes coming together. And so the form is eternal, as the Jiva is. Personalities that one acquires as a result of participating in that environment is eternal, unlike the material body, material personality, and so forth. But that said, no, the liberated Jiva does not become a different Shakti. It's changeless, as the Gita says. But it can be, it's imbued with the Swarup Shakti, just like we're kind of imbued with the Maya Shakti. And the result is we have a material personality, material body. We identify with the Swarup Shakti or Bhakti. When that identification becomes complete, then you have a spiritual body and a spiritual mind and personality, but you don't become the Swarup Shakti. So there are jivas who are muktas, liberated in the spiritual world, who are different in constitution than the Radha, Nanda, Sridham, Subal, who are constituted entirely of Swarup Shakti. But they're not different in terms of their capacity to function and participate. So they function and participate as if they were fully constituted of Swarup Shakti, but really, technically speaking, they're Tatastha Shakti, imbued with the Swarup Shakti. I see there's a question from Nanta Govinda, and he has written here. Let me address that. He asks that regarding the discussion yesterday on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that I don't, he refers to the book Surya Siddhanta. I don't think that Bhaktisiddhanta wrote the book Surya Siddhanta. And this came up a couple of weeks in the past. But the question is about astronomy and Bhaktisiddhanta's position on astronomy and how it differed from other Vaishnavas of the time and what to think about that. And so what little bit I know is of course that there's the Puranic perspective, astronomical perspective on the cosmography, on astronomy. And then there is the European Galilean, perspective that the planets are, for example, moving around the sun, which replaced the geocentric perspective that was prior to that and was largely biblically based. That's why it was a big controversy. It appeared that Galileo was contradicting the Bible, and I think they were going to cut off his head for it. But his objective perspective prevailed, and so this was in contrast, or in some ways contradicting the Puranic perspective, which wasn't necessarily. I don't think it was a geocentric perspective. I don't get that from the Puranic perspective, but there are obviously some differences. This was not something that the Vrindavan Goswamis dealt with. It was that sun-centric perspective, I'm using it kind of like broad terms here, had made its way into Indian discourse, and the traditionalists were dealing with it to one extent or another. The Vrindavan Goswamis did not deal with it at all. Others, traditionalists, and here I refer to persons who kind of looked at the Puranas more as the source of their historical understanding, their astrological their understanding and so forth, cosmological understanding. Some of them tried to refute the European perspective. Some of them made a kind of a merger, if you will. The Vrindavan Goswamis didn't deal with it. I think they were just too busy with establishing their own sampradaya in their Atma-centric and Prem-centric, Radha-centric, perspective. But in between these two, the Puranic and the European, is this Surya Siddhanta. This is another idea. So Bhaktisiddhanta wrote a commentary on Surya Siddhanta, and that's how he got his name, Siddhanta Saraswati, or commentary on it or something. He did something with it. And yes, he had different opinions than some of the leading opinions at the time, and he spoke forcefully for them. I don't know what they were, and it is somewhat of a relative subject. It's a moving goalpost. You could make a strong argument for a geocentric perspective just by kind of looking at it from an entirely different angle, as opposed to a sun-centric perspective. But anyway, I'm not familiar really with all of his arguments, but that's just what I know. So Surya Siddhanta wasn't written by him. I think he commented on it, and he had a different insight that was controversial at the time, and went against some of the leading thinkers in that school, and he became known for being an independent thinker. I don't know if there's any conclusion as to who was right about what, or even what the details were. I've never seen anything that speaks to that. You ask, what is the innovative approach he was preaching there, and why it starts many discussions till this day. I think discussions to this day about the nature of the cosmography, the heavens and so forth, the stars and planets and whatnot, is arising largely due to a scientific perspective on that, as opposed to something a fifth canto Bhagavatam perspective on it, which most Western and international community of Vaishnavas is somewhat familiar with and doesn't understand, if it's understandable. Perspective that is a Puranic perspective, as Sukadev says when he begins to explain that to Parikshit Maharaj. And in saying that, he implies that it's relative. What the world really is a transformation of the modes of nature, and there are different ways of looking at it. I'm going to present it to what the Puranas say, and so he gives that. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that he was speaking to Sukadev for the sake of other people in the audience at the time, some of whom were mystic yogis, and spoke about the cosmos in a way that would be attractive to them, whereas Parikshit Maharaj didn't really need to hear about that because he was qualified as a bhakta to meditate on the form of Bhagavan as it's described in the scriptures, rather than a way of thinking about the world that corresponds with God, which was supposed to be what the fifth canto narrative is about. So, I mean, the controversy today that I don't know, how much Bhaktisiddhanta's perspective plays into that and whatnot, but those are my thoughts. Does that help? Or maybe you have a follow-up question on it, Antagovinda?
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I also remember hearing that he was like
Can't
16
hear you.
years old when he wrote, when he did this.
I can see your mouth moving, but I can't hear you.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
I
Maybe you're muted. Maybe you can
hear
unmute
you.
yourself.
I'm unmuted. I know I'm unmuted.
Still can't hear
did.
you. Anyway,
I am unmuted.
I hope it helps.
Hello, Hare Krishna.
I can't hear anybody. I don't know.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
He may not have been, he might have been on a different
Hare
channel.
Krishna.
Okay,
I was able to hear him.
Okay.
good for you.
Oops, sorry. Just trying to help technically.
Maybe you weren't on the English channel. Maybe you weren't hadn't. So anyway, little details of the system we're still working out.
We have one more question from Atula Nandamarsh. Krishna descendiende al mundo en forma directa o la hace a través de Vishnu y las formas Vishnu provienen de Balaram? No sé. I don't know. Maharaj, you want to translate? Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Krishna comes to the world through Mahavishnu, even though he's independent and the source of Mahavishnu, in a sense. So he's the source of Mahavishnu, being the Swayam Bhagavan, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. And when he appears, Vishnu is inside of him and every other avatar, and so forth. So he's independent of Vishnu, but still you could say he comes through him. It's Vishnu provides a portal. He manifests the world in cycles, and in a particular cycle, then Krishna makes his appearance. I think that answers the first part of the question. And the second part of the question, Krishna expands as Balaram for Leela in Vrindavan. Then the two of them expand for Leela in Dwarka and Mathura. So Krishna expands as Mathuresh Krishna, and then Dwarkesh Krishna, and Balaram expands as Mool Sankarshan for Leela in Mathura and Dwarka. And then in Dwarka, Aniruddha and Pradyumna are the sons, I think, and grandson of Krishna. And then these four, they expand in Vaikuntha. And so what we find there is that Balaram is represented in Vaikuntha as Mahasankarshan. Krishna is represented there as Narayan. So Narayan in Vaikuntha is not coming from Balaram, coming from Krishna. And then the Mahasankarshan, he manifests as Mahavishnu, and Mahavishnu manifests as Garbhodaksha Vishnu, and then Garbhodaksha Vishnu manifests. Well, I should say that, excuse me, Mahasankarshan, there's Mool Sankarshan for Leela in Mathura and Dwarka. And then among the Chaturvyuha in Vaikuntha, Krishna expands as Narayan and Balaram as Mahavishnu. And Aniruddha and Pradyumna as Aniruddha and Pradyumna in Vaikuntha. And then Mahasankarshan appears as Mahavishnu in this world, and then Pradyumna as Garbhodaksha Vishnu, and Aniruddha as Kshirodaksha Vishnu. So in a sense, Mahavishnu is the avatar of Mahasankarshan, who is the expansion, Prakash, in Vaikuntha of Balaram. I think that answers the question. So I think we're out of time. Thank you for your questions. Hope to be with you next week. Lord Premanand.
Raj. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna devotees. Good to see everybody.
Haribo.
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 Okay. Guess I'm gonna end the
Hare
meeting. for
Krishna. Thanks a
everyone.
lot.
Hare Krishna. Bye. Great to see everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Happy New Year. Hare Krishna. Dandavad.
Happy New Year.
Sure.
Happy New Year, Hare Krishna. Lord Premanand.
Yeah, because that seems to happen. You guys don't hear each other. You're
Jai Gurudev. Oh,
Yeah,
I could
because
hear when
you're both, even if you both go on to English, but because you're going, yeah, I'm not sure why that's,
I could hear at all times.
that seems to be a little glitch. I'm
couldn't
sure
hear
there's
two of those
probably a
questions.
way, yeah, but
The Spanish ones I
there's a
missed.
way that you could hear each other, but I'm not sure what
Can you
that
hear
would
me,
entail.
Mataji?
If it means turning off, not having
That's funny.
mute the original audio to hear each other, that might be what you could try. Right. You just, yeah. That's one of the things, one of the little details that we're trying to work out. But otherwise, I think it's going pretty well. What do you think? Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see if we can get more of an attendance. Yeah. Okay. Bye. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thanks a lot.
Here too. Hare Krishna. And I guess we could ask the devotees, the Bulgarian devotees too, if they want to do they can be translating on this call as well. If there's anybody that does simultaneous translation, that would be up for it. So if there is anyone, let me know. I'll ask. Yeah, any nationalities that have, yeah, we can have up to 5 languages.
Right.
So far we have 2. I don't know if that includes English, the 5 languages. Yeah, but anyway, at least at least 2 more languages we can add. So if anybody is gung ho, let me know, or anyway, yeah, let me know. All right, Jai, see everybody next week. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol.